Dumelang Ralamuhela, who initiating Insight with Sibongile. The Victim Empowerment Program aims to support the victims and survivors of crime and violence, as well as their families, to deal with the incident that he or she has experienced. To tackle this topic, the Victim Empowerment Program, please help me welcome my guest, Ms. Veronica Gantana. Ms. Veronica, welcome.
Thank you.
Is my narration or definition correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Tell us more about this program.
The Victim Empowerment Program...
Yeah, it's a tongue twister, I know. Victim Empowerment Program.
Yeah. In 1996, the government then launched the National Crime Prevention Strategy. It was an attempt to address the high levels of crime in the country. But soon they've realized that, you cannot just look at the crime, what's happening with the victims. And so the mandate for the victims, Victim Empowerment Program, derives from that strategy. And the main purpose was to facilitate programs and policies intersectorally and interdepartmentally to look at programs for victims, to support them, to protect, and also to empower.
Okay. And what is your involvement in the sector?
I am at the Provincial Office of Social Development, so our role from that officer's side is to look at policies, to also have an input in funding of the various NGOs that's working within the sector, and then also to do training and capacity building, both for departmental staff, but also for the NGOs, and also to do awareness campaigns with our NGOs and the celebration of national and international days.
What's your typical week like?
The typical week could be, doing a little bit of admin, also attending meetings, attending trainings. There are forum meetings, mandated forum meetings that we attend on a provincial level, but also attending meetings from the national department. We could also receive calls of ladies or men that need placement in a shelter for gender-based violence victims.
Another tongue twister.
It could also be to assess a victim of human trafficking. Yeah. So it really varies. Sometimes you plan, but by the end of the day, if there's a crisis, you must leave whatever you're busy with and then attend so that, the victims aren't, subject to any secondary victimization.
The training that you just told us about, is it your training?
It is. We train on the programs as officials of DSD, but we also use external trainers to train, but on condition that their training is accredited with our Council for Social Service Professionals, so that we want to make sure that the information then that goes out to either service providers or the volunteers that's also assisting in some of the programs, that it is accredited and we know the content is of a good quality.
What is the content of these training sessions?
It really depends on who our target groups is.
Okay.
If it is for our volunteers, we would then look at what is violence, what is crime, a little bit of the trauma that a person experiences if you fall victim to either crime or violence. We would look at, how to identify what are the needs of those persons. We would also look at what the legislation is saying around that, and so that when the person are confronted with a victim of crime or violence, that they know how to contain the person. If it's volunteers, they will only contain. It will only be qualified social workers that will go into the whole counseling, because a volunteer would normally not, venture into that because they did not receive the necessary training.
Wow.
And as I said earlier, it is so crucial that we don't subject any of our victims to secondary victimization.
It's interesting for me that we speak about crime and violence, or crime or violence. Can you separate the two?
Is
there a difference?
I think it's a very fine line between the two. But for instance, if I was a victim of armed robbery at my house, for instance, you know, that is a crime that was committed. That's where we sort of draw the distinction. If I was abused, that is also a crime. But you know, perhaps the difference come the type of services that I might need. Say, for instance, there was a robbery at my house. I would then, there's no need for me to be admitted to a shelter. I can then, you know, access services of a psychologist or a social worker, you know, and then come back to my home or even go to work still. Whereas if I was a victim of gender-based violence, domestic violence, and my life is at risk, I might then need to go into a shelter if there's no family or other, you know, people that will accommodate me with my children. And so there in the shelter, it will then be a range of services. It will be, you know, the counseling. It will be empowerment in terms of skills. Sometimes it's soft skills that the victim would need. But other times also skills to empower them, so when they exit, they will then be able to financially look after themselves and not perhaps be so dependent on the partner who abused them in the first instance.
As I understand exactly, you know, the fine line, because I could argue and say if somebody has committed crime, or you spoke about armed robbery, for instance. Somebody comes and commits armed robbery in my space. Not only is that a crime, it's also violence because it's violation of my space.
Absolutely, you're
so
right.
I suppose what you then separate is the distinction between perhaps the nature of violence or crime that one has suffered. Then you would know how to refer them to specific services.
Yes, correct.
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, we will be joined by the beneficiary of this program, Miss Jackie Chawuge. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Initiating Insight with Sibongile. We're still sitting with Miss Veronica Khantana, and now we are joined by Miss Jackie Chawuge. Miss Jackie Chawuge is the survivor and beneficiary of this program. Sis Jackie, hi.
Hello.
Please, you know, take us through your story.
Sure. It's a long story. I don't know where I would
You have
start.
2 minutes.
Yeah, domestic violence happened, and I was young, married young, and I did not know that there's something like symptoms that you should look for. I thought all the households were experiencing the same, so who was I to complain? But as soon as I had
I'm very
guts,
curious, Sis Jackie, how young were you?
I was married 22.
Oh, okay.
And as soon as I started opening up, the first response I got was, all women go through this.
Whoa.
So just go back and fix your marriage and stop being a chicken.
So when you went to your family?
Yes.
Whoa.
And we've eaten lobola, so we can't help you there. You want to embarrass the family, and it's irreversible, so chillax, you know. So yeah, I had to take it as it came, and I started learning on my own that things happen in marriages, and you know,
in any case, all women go through it.
Yeah,
sure.
And I took it all: financial, physical, emotional, economical, everything that you can think of, you know. And if you don't have support, you become strong, but at the same time, you are vulnerable. So I just had to man up or woman up in my case. So yeah, that's me in my 20-something years of marriage.
So you went through 27 rather 20-something years
it
of
dragged
that.
to that long. Yeah, because when you get into relationships, either it's school or work or church or relationships of love, you invest and you don't just wake up and pack up, as people would say, hamba, leave, you know what I'm saying? You invest, and it's an investment that comes with a lot. Love matters are heart matters. And regardless of how much we speak and advocate, women are still trapped because there's a lot that we take into relationships. So people would tell me, go, divorce, separate, stay, whatever. It boiled down to me and my introspection of what is it that I want really, and is it worthy of staying? Is it fixable? Is it gonna work really, you know? And I forgot all the time that it was not about me, but the perpetrator. And you own up to someone else's misery to a point that you want to carry them as well. And you forget about your own peace of mind and safety and sanity. So it's a triangle, as they say. And if you don't break it, it's either it will make you or break you. So we stay as we stay in marriages or relationships, but we have to get support. I always make an example that even a child, you take a child to crash, they bully the child at crash. The child doesn't despair immediately until somebody does something. You go to school as a young person, you go to high school, you bullied at school. You don't just pack your bags and say, I'm done, I don't want to go to school. People enjoy things, even at work, there's bullying, there's abuse. You don't just resign and say. So we all get into the cycles of our miseries, and it takes a person to say, I'm not doing this anymore, you know? Yeah.
Sure, wow. You know, because human beings are such complex species, Sis Veronica, it is very difficult that even when you get into a relationship to know what to expect. Yes, we may speak, you know, because sometimes, you know, actions speak louder than words. And somebody has fed you this and fed you this and fed you this in words, but actions become something else. So you can never go in there, and because we're not psychics, and I don't think even psychics can actually master the human element, because it's complexity at its best. So at which point did you feel, Uguti, it's enough?
You know what? We are never freed from this crisis, because even when you live with all of it. It depends on you what you want to carry on with if you live. So for me, it was just a yo-yo diet. And the honeymoon stage was severe because he could even manipulate my family and go and tell them he loves me and then buy them this and pamper them with that.
And considering the psychology of your family to begin with, that they the ones who suggested, look, please forgive me, but somehow there was an element of perpetuation from their side to all of this, because they said, hamba.
Yeah, true. By the time they realized it was late because I had to man up, as I said, that nobody is coming on my rescue. You know, the service provision as well of SAPS and other entities was not coming on board, you know. So this is a one-man's show, actually. And that's why you find that there's femicide. A man doesn't want to be defeated. Immediately when you start standing up and saying, I'm not doing this anymore, they are defeated, but they don't want defeat. So you have to get to a point where you say, it's do or die. You know, so for me, I went to police stations, I went to social workers, I did this, it did not work. So it, again, boiled back to me to say, do what you need to do.
But what did not work? Did you not receive the service you were asking for?
It's always...
What did not work?
It's always boomeranged to go back to the family and talk to uncles and sit down with your partner, because people don't understand that people who are aggressive and abusive have issues themselves. So you are expected to be a woman and become your own advocate at some point. And because you know the person better, they want to look at the elements of how are you not getting it right, because you know this person better. Give them what they want and that just marry them and make them marry. You know what I'm saying? So women are still going to go low with this. It's still going to be a struggle of forever until we get to assist men as well and find out what is it that makes them what they are. Because the issue lies with the perpetrator. And we are focusing on ourselves and fixing ourselves and going up and down with ourselves. But we are living where the problem is and where the problem lies.
Sis Veronica, is this program linked to the South African police services? And while you answer that, the other question is, what do you think? It worries me that she says nothing worked, especially because she went and reported that and all of that. But before you answer that, we need to take a break. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Initiating Insight with Sibongile. Kajeko re bua ka Victim Empowerment Program, and we are still joined by Miss Veronica Khantana and Sis Jackie Chauke, and we are talking about this program. Before we went on a break, I was asking Uguti if this program is in any way linked to SAPS and what it's worrying that Usis Jackie, before we went on a break, she said, she couldn't be helped wherever she went. And Sis Vero?
At some of the police stations, not all, there's a victim empowerment center, which is run by volunteers, but there's also a social auxiliary worker and a social worker that's supposed to run 24/7, which means if the victim goes to the police station to lay a charge, which is supposed to be taken not in the open but in a separate room, they then refer the victim there for containment. And then if the victim would need accommodation, to refer for follow-up services. However, that doesn't always happen. And I think, it's sometimes the attitude of the service providers, whether it's social work, whether it's the police, whether it's at the health center. And I really feel sometimes, the victims don't get the service that they require or that they need at that point in time. In other instances, again, we have what you call the Tutuzela care centers that's linked to hospitals. Some of the victims that goes there, they report, they're satisfied with the manner in which, they receive the service. But there's really a need for us as service providers to step up our game and to really have the sensitivity and the respect, and you don't need to decide for the victim, but when the victim, because it takes a lot, it takes guts, it takes, just to decide, but now I'm going forward for you. Because as she correctly said, she struggled on her own, she went to family, it didn't work, and when she finally said, but now I must go forward, and you go with the expectation that you will receive a proper and a quality service. And sadly, it don't always happen. And that's why there's a lot still to be done, with service providers, so that they are really sensitive for the needs and the complexity of the abuse that the victim has gone through.
You said some police stations have this social work
I think they are, I don't have the exact numbers. It's more than 60 or 70% police stations in Gauteng had the service. It's an NGO that is rendering the service at the police station. So we work in conjunction with the Department of Community Safety. They are responsible, to ensure that service is at the police station. From our departments, we will then ensure that there's a funded NGO and, that can render the service.
We're giving you a job. You need to advocate for the filtering of all police stations for this service, because we need it.
Yes,
everywhere.
Absolutely. I think the other challenge at this point in time is, you know, when it comes to funding, DSD is currently responsible for the funding of NGOs. And the cake is so small and there's so many people, you know, that needs. So even if there's an NGO that is willing, it will be dependent on funding. But because we understand the need for this, you know, they would really treat that as a priority when it comes to funding. So some of the existing NGOs, they are then willing to extend their services to the police station. But we are really, you know, going out, speaking to some NGOs to ask them, you know, we can also not mandate them, but it's a request for those management to decide, okay, fine, we are willing to extend our services, and because it's ideally it should be a 24/7 service.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So DSD must get more ingredients to bake this
absolutely
bigger cake.
make the cake, but you know that is also treasury. It comes from treasury.
Treasury, yeah, treasury. Cool manje, because this is very critical.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, we do. Sis Jackie, what sort of help did you receive then from this program?
Yes, I said the service was poor. I meant the sub-service from
Yes, we get
Sandringham.
that, yes.
I went to Sandringham because I live near Sandringham. So there I didn't get help. The policeman did not know what to do with me because I said to him, emotional abuse. He expected me to come bloody bruised and murked, and then he panicked. I sat there for 6 hours because he didn't know what to do.
Sure.
He finally called the captain. The captain finally referred me to Alex, which has victim empowerment. And then I got my service there, because I wanted a shelter and everything was done properly. I ended up in a shelter, and yeah, but other police stations don't have. They really, DST has to really spread it. Because I can imagine people who are living near that area, Brimley, Q and Alice, they are not getting help whatsoever. And they don't even know that there's shelters and things that can help them. So, yeah.
Sis Vero, because of time, we are running really out of time now. Do you ever get male victims, for instance, coming to this program?
There are male victims, and at this point in time, we have 9 NGOs that's working with men and boys. I know, you know, she earlier said, you know, that is where it needs to start. Yeah. So we have in Gauteng, we have 1 shelter for male victims. But there's increase, but again, the attitude when the male victim goes to lay a charge, he becomes the laughing stock in the police station, and that's why many of them won't go forward. They will suffer in silence because of the treatment they will then, you know, receive from service providers.
Sure, it is sad, eh?
It is.
That men are not as stones as they come across, because I mean they are human beings, and yet there's more of this gender-based violence from them, and you can imagine it's such a tricky tension. I mean, I understand why people would say to a man who goes to a police station, "Oh, you're weak. I don't come with tricks here. I don't come and play games." But they're human beings too. You know, they need that help. So, Sister Jackie, anything you want to say just for 30 seconds before we go?
Everyone who is going through domestic violence at home, and it's not only about men and women in the house, even the family disputes, they cause you to be emotionally you know, distraught. So come and access service. We've got social development offices everywhere, Adapt in Alex, Power everywhere. So just access the services. They are for free, and social workers and Oxys are sitting there waiting for people to come and access services, and people are reluctant. And men, please, I'm asking, I'm begging, seek help. To sit home angry and ending up with femicide is not a solution.
All right, Sissy. She just closed the program for us. Thank you, Sis Vero, for coming through. Thank you, Sis Jackie. Until next time, that's all the time we had for today. Take care. The numbers are on the screen.